Hello everybody, welcome to my first deck tech video. Today we will be covering Mishra, claimed by Gix. And I don't know the budget of the deck, but our main goal here is to get Mishra onto the field as fast as possible, then swing with as many attackers as possible. So, here we got Mishra. Nothing fancy, it's just Mishra claimed by Gix. His ability is, whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. If Mishra claimed by Gix and a creature named Phyrexian Dragon Engine are attacking, and you both own and control them, exile them, and meld them into Mishra, lost to Phyrexia. It enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. We'll get into that at a later date, but we're not going to get into that right now. The basic lands will go first. We need 3 mountains and 5 swamps. That'll cover our basic lands. Then we got our non-basic lands. We got Bajuka Bog for that graveyard hate, because when it enters the battlefield, we can exile target player's graveyard. It's a good source of removal, for graveyards at least. We got a Barren Moor for some late game card advantage and early game mana. A Shizo Death Storehouse to make Mishra unblockable so we can get him in the early game, and in the late game make a big threat unblockable. Or at least give it fear. Then we got Sokenzan, Crucible of Defense. No, that's his Defiance. Sokenzan, Crucible of Defiance. It can tap for a red, or we can channel it for 1 red and 3 to create 2 1/1 spirits with haste. We got Mad Blind Mountain, some good utility. It counts as a mountain, so if we had anything that said, oh, search up a mountain, you get this instead. We can pay a red to tap it and shuffle our library, only if we have 2 or more red permanents, but yeah, with this deck, shuffling is one of our weaknesses. It's very easy for the deck to go dead late game. We got Castle Embereth as a late game anthem. Or even an early game anthem if we get enough creatures out fast enough. It's just a good card. Underrated in my opinion. Forgotten Cave is basically a red Barren Moor, but better because, well, it's red. Shinko the Bloodsoaked Keep gives Mishra some form of protection and evasion for himself for first strike. In the form of first strike. We can give him first strike, and basically what first strike does is allow the creature to attack before the other creatures. But if you were watching this video, you probably knew that already. Or maybe you didn't, I don't know, I'm not here to judge. Now, Shinka and Shizo are 2 of our main ways of evasion, but in the next step we got our multicolored lands, we got our command tower. Every commander deck should be, if it's running 2 or more colors, should have a command tower. We have a Plaza of Heroes. This one's a bit it's a bit wordy, so I'll read it out. We can tap it to add colorless, or add 1 mana of any color, but only spend that mana to cast a legendary spell. Then we can tap it to add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents we control. Then we can pay 3, tap it, exile it, and give target legendary creature hexproof and indestructible. Those are very important keywords. We need to keep Mishra alive so we can actually get his attack triggers to go off. This luxury suite will enter untapped if we have 2 or more opponents. Yeah, that's pretty much all it does. It taps for red or black. It's a good card. Then we got Temple of Malice, which allows us to scry 1 on its entrance. And taps for red or black again. Blackcleave Cliffs is good in the early game, not so good in the late game, but it's still a land, and land is always useful. It enters the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or fewer lands. Then we have Rakdos Carnarium, which bounces the land on its entrance. Doesn't have to be tapped or untapped, it can just be any land. But it taps for red and black, not just red or black. Then we got Haunted Ridge, which is like the opposite of Blackcleave Cliffs. it enters tapped unless we control 2 or more lands. So the more lands, the better. Even in the late game, this is still a good card. Foreboding Ruins enters untapped if we use a mountain or a swamp and reveal it from our hand. If we don't, it enters tapped. Smoldering Marsh enters the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. There are ways to search out the basics in here, but I'm thinking about cutting out Smoldering Marsh. Temple of the False God taps for 2 colorless, but only can be activated if we control 5 or more lands. That's still a good card in my opinion. Rogue's Passage can be used to give a threat unblockable or give Mishra himself unblockable. It's a useful card. Care Keep creates some chump blockers early game and fodder for the late game because Mishra doesn't say that the creatures have to have power in order to attack. So the kobold tokens this land creates are very useful. I would used to run Springjack Pasture in this, but meh, got boring. Command Beacon. We can just tap it, sacrifice it, and put Mishra into our hand from the command zone if he gets too expensive. Access Tunnel to give Mishra unblockable. Because a creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. Mishra's power is 3. So, yeah. That only works on Mishra claimed by Gix, by the way. Mishra lost to Phyrexia is a lot stronger. Reliquary Tower for no hand size limit. We're not really drawing that many cards. Oh, wait. Yeah, we are drawing that many cards. I forgot. Because we have Arch of Araska. Arch of Araska can be activated for 5 mana to draw a card if we have the City's Blessing. But this isn't our only source of value. No. We've got other things. Other tricks, toys, tools of the trade. We have multicolored cards. Only 2 others in the deck. We have Bedevil, which is a good piece of removal for target artifact, creature, or planeswalker. It's an instant for a black, and a red. And yeah, it destroys a creature, artifact, or planeswalker. Then we got Carter Doomscourge. For a red, a black, and 2, when Carter Doomscourge enters the battlefield, until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able, and attack a player other than you if able. Basically, they are goaded. Goading means what I just said. And whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Useful. Very useful. Because we have a lot of fodder in this deck. A lot of little creatures will be dying this game. We got Jeweled Lotus to power out Mishra. Moving into the colorless cards. I forgot to mention that. Mana Crypt. Also for powering out heavy threats early game or just getting Mishra back on the field. This is the Double Masters 2022 print. Double Masters printing. We have a Mox Amber, just because I just really like the card Mox Amber, and it's really useful in a deck that features legendary creatures, or just any commander deck, really. If you get your commander out, it's basically another land you can play for free. We got Soul Ring. What commander deck doesn't run Soul Ring? You can tap it to add 2 colorless, and yeah. Skull Clamp. You can pay 1 to equip it, pay 1 to cast it. It gives a creature +1/-1, and whenever a creature dies, we draw it. Whenever the equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards. With things like Bitterblossom and Crankgo Tin Street Kingpin in this deck, those are very useful. We have a Rakdos Signet, because who doesn't need more mana? We have an Arcane Signet, again, mana value, mana ramp, early game, very good. We have a Talisman of Indulgence, because it's basically Arcane Signet, but slightly worse. We have Swiftfoot Boots for late game or early game or any time of the game protection. Honestly, Swiftfoot Boots, real MVP in this deck. Lightning Greaves, slightly worse Swiftfoot Boots in my opinion. Sure, it gives it Shroud, but sometimes we just want to target Mishra, you know. Stronic Resonator to copy Mishra's attack trigger, which is, again, whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. That's pretty much the main focus of this deck. And Stronic Resonator helps us achieve draining our opponents to death with Mishra. So that's a good card. Burnished Heart searches out the few basics we have in the deck, but yeah, it's in here for sentimental reasons. Phyrexian Dragon Engine, because you can't... Okay, time to talk about Phyrexian Dragon Engine. When it enters, it has the double strike 2/2 for 3. When it enters the battlefield from the graveyard, you may discard your hand to draw 3 cards. Very useful, because most of the time we just dump our hand and have nothing left. With an unearthed cost of a red, and 3, it can come back from the dead, basically. Reanimate itself. But with Phyrexian Dragon Engine and Mishra in the deck, you get Mishra Lost to Phyrexia. A very rare to get little meld combination here, but it doesn't really matter because its abilities are broken. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose 3. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Mishra deals 3 damage to any target. Destroy target artifact or planeswalker. Creatures you control gain menace and trample until end of turn. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 until end of turn. And create 2 tapped Power Stone tokens. It's a 9/9. So, yeah, basically what we usually go for is the menace trample, the -1/-1, and either a combination of the 3 damage or discarding cards to empty out our opponent's hand. Or if we just need to bolt someone to finish them off, we can do that with Mishra. So, yeah, that's the little segment on Mishra Lost to Phyrexia. Back to the colorless cards. We got Phyrexian Altar. We can sack a creature to add 1 mana of any color. For 3 colorless mana, it's not that bad of a card. I might even say it's a very good card. We have a Lithiform Engine to copy pretty much anything we control. Most of the time we'll be copying Mishra's ability if we have a lot of attackers, or we'll just be making copies of valuable permanents, such as, you know what, it's not really that important what we copy. What matters is it's here. We have an Aetherflux Reservoir as an alternative win condition. If we can't get there with our attackers, the amount of life gain we have with Mishra is pretty crazy. So the more spells we cast, the more life we gain. Eventually we'll reach the magical threshold of 50 and shoot someone in the face with a giant blue Death Star for 50. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. Pay 50 life. Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to target creature or player. For 4 colorless mana, not that bad of an effect. Mere Battle Spirit for some attackers. For 7 colorless mana, you get a 4/7 artifact creature Mirror Construct. When Mirror Battle Spirit enters the battlefield, put 4 1/1 colorless Mirror artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield. The second attack doesn't really matter, it just matters that it gives us a bunch of little guys. But I'll read it anyway. When Mirror Battle Spirit attacks, you may tap X untapped mirror you control. If you do, Mirror Battle Spirit gets +X/+0 until end of turn and deals X damage to the defending player. It's a decent card, yeah. Then we got Phyrexian Triniform, because this is kind of a theme deck, but not really. When Phyrexian Triniform dies, create 3/3/3 colorless golem artifact creature tokens as an encore cost of 12. You can pay 12, exile it from your graveyard, and for each opponent, you create a token copy of this card. That is fairly good in the late game, if it's in the grave, that is. It costs 9 colorless mana to play on its own, so probably not that good in the early game. I mean, if you can get it out, get it out. But, meh. Then we got Portal to Phyrexia. When Portal to Phyrexia enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. This costs the same amount to play as Phyrexian Triniform, so 9 colorless. But basically what it allows us to do is play with our opponent's deck. So that's always fun, right? Moving on to the black cards. We'll start with the Planeswalker. The only Planeswalker in the deck. Tevesh Zot, Doom of Fools. We can +2 Tevesh, 2 loyalty to create 2 01 black thralls. We can +1 Tevesh to sacrifice another creature or planeswalker. If we do, draw 2 cards, then draw another card if the sacrifice permanent was a commander. Then we can -10 him to gain control of all commanders and put all commanders from the battle zone onto the command zone. No. Put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control. For 5 mana, not that bad of an effect, especially in this format, which is commander. Viscera Seer, a sacrifice outlet that allows us to scry our deck. Look at the top card. Choose whether it goes on the top or the bottom, basically. It works well with the Aristocrat sub-theme we have in here. Example, Blood Artist. When Blood Artist or another creature dies, you may have target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. For a black and 1, early game drop, not that bad. We have Jadar, Dual Color of Nephalia. And for a black and 1, we get a 1/1 human wizard, legendary creature human wizard. With, at the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie with Decayed. What Decayed is basically the creature must attack, well, not must attack. The creature, when it attacks, it's sacrificed at the end of combat, and it cannot block. Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose is next. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And for a black, and 3, we can give our creatures lifelink until end of turn. Is a 1/3 for 3. Not that bad. Does fail the vanilla test, but his effects make it worth it. We have Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor, because you can't have a Mishra deck without Gix. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. For 3 mana, it's pretty good already, but he's a 3/3, and he has 1 other ability. For a black, and 4, discard X cards, exile the top X cards of target's opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among them without exile cards this way without paying their mana costs. So say somebody just used a Worldly Tutor to fetch up a Blightsteel Colossus to the top of their library. We activate Gix, steal that card, and play it for free. Then we kill them with their own thing. Then we got Braid's Arisen Nightmare. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, for each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. Shieldred the Apocalypse. Black, 2, Death Touch 4/5. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. Fairly simple, but ultimately very dangerous. Phyrexian Obliterator, 4 black. For a 5/5 with Trample. Whenever a sorcery deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that sorcerer's controller sacrifices that many permanents. Like I said, Phyrexian sub-theme. But it's just a really good card in this deck because you can use Mishra Lost to Phyrexia to no, wait. No, you can't. Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Black, and 3 for a 2/4 zombie. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is our devotion to black. We gain life equal to the total life lost this way. Grave Titan. People hate Grave Titan. I don't. Black, and 4 for a 6/6 giant with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, put 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield. Generating an army very quickly is very useful. Then we have Machias, the Unhallowed. 6-drop, 5/5, Intimidate. Whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. Other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. All the tokens we have can come back from the grave if killed. In battle, I think. Probably. Ask a judge. I'm not a judge. Phyrexian Reclamation allows us to pay 2 mana and 2 life to return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Bitterblossom triggers on our every upkeep we get. Every time it's our upkeep, we lose 1 life and create a 1/1 black fairy with flying. That's a useful card. Cursed of Restless Dead. It lets us enchant one of our enemies, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under the enchanted player's control, you may create a 2/2 black zombie token with Decayed. We already discussed what Decayed does in this video. Black Market Connections. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, choose 1 or more. You create a treasure token. You lose 1 life. Draw a card. Lose 2 life. Or create a 3/2 changeling shapeshifter with Changeling. You lose 3 life. It's pretty useful in the early game. Kind of a dud in the late game. But what matters is it's good. Exquisite Blood. Because whenever an opponent loses life, which they will be doing quite frequently, we will gain that much life. Sanguine Bond combos with Exquisite Blood for infinite life and infinite death on our enemies, because whenever we gain life, target opponent loses that much life. You can see the combo right here. Wound Reflection, just a generally good card. At the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. 6 mana, more of a middle game card. We got a Vampiric Tutor. Search for any of our good cards, put it on top of our deck, shuffle, no. Search for any of our good cards, shuffle our deck, put the card on top, and lose 2 life. We have a Demonic Tutor, which allows us to search our library for a card, put it in our hand, then shuffle. Pretty good. Pretty good. Feed the Swarm is some removal. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana cost. It's useful, but it's only at sorcery speed, so it's still good. Diabolic Intent allows us to sacrifice a creature and search our library for a card, put that card into our hand, then shuffle. All for the cost of 2 mana. Basically a worse Demonic Tutor. Then we have Toxic Deluge, one of the few board wipes in the deck. We can pay 3 to cast it, and then we can pay an additional X life to give all creatures -X/-X. It's sufficient for when the opponent has things we don't want them to have. Then lastly, we have our red cards. We have Loyal Apprentice, and it has haste and is a 2/1 for 2. A red 1. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, create a 1/1 Thopter with flying, and the Thopter will gain haste. So it's basically free attackers every turn. Tealanali's Summoner. Whenever Tealanali's Summoner attacks, you may pay X and a red. If you do, create X 1/1 red elemental creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. At the beginning of next end step, exile the tokens unless we have the City's Blessing. The City's Blessing only happens if we have 10 or more permanent cards, so creatures, enchantments, lands, artifacts, etc. Ardaz, Cobbler of War. Haste 1/1. Whenever Ardaz, Cobbler of War, or another creature enters the battlefield under our control, that creature gets +2/+0. 1 and a red and 3. Create a 1/1 red goblin with haste. Activate only as a sorcery. Costs 2 mana to get her out, and it's pretty good. Makari the Lucky Grot, otherwise known as Cranko Tin Street Kingpin. Whenever he attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on him, and then create a number of 1/1 goblins equal to its power. So it starts as a 1/2, but can get out of hand very, very quick. Combat Celebrant allows us to take an extra combat step. And word for word, it says, if Combat Celebrant hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control, and after this phase, there's just an additional combat phase. So, yeah, we got a bunch of little creatures out. We attack with them. The Celebrant's on the field. We attack again. Draining again with Mishra. To clarify, Mishra himself does not have to attack to trigger his ability. It just says whenever you attack. People get the misconception about that sometimes. Professional Facebreaker. Menace 2/3. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Sacrifice the treasure, exile the top card of your library, you may play that card this turn. Good source of mana ramp, especially in the early game, when the fields are underdeveloped for your enemies. Goblin Rabblemaster. Other goblin creatures you control attack each combat if able. So far, not that good, but at the beginning of your combat, you can create a 1/1 red goblin creature token with haste. Whenever Goblin Rabblemaster attacks, it gets +1/+0 for each other attacking goblin. For 3 mana, not that bad, honestly. Handweir Garrison, also for 3 mana, we can get a 2/3 human soldier. Whenever Handweir Garrison attacks, create 2 1/1 red human creature tokens onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. That is very dangerous if you order your triggers right. Feldon of the Third Path, 2/3 for red and 2 and tap. Create a token that's a copy of target creature in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. That, with Phyrexian Triniform, allows us to create somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 golems. I don't know the exact number. Purphoros, God of the Forge. Indestructible 6/5, as long as their devotion to red is less than 5. Purphoros isn't a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Purphoros deals 2 damage to each opponent. The last effect doesn't really matter, unless we want to go for the kill. But this one, that's the one that matters. A red and 2, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Not that good, but the third effect is pretty good. Delina Wild Mage allows us to copy Mishra multiple times if we get lucky. Whenever Delina attacks, choose a target creature we control, then roll a d20. 1 to 14, create a tapped attacking token that's a copy of the creature, except it's not legendary, and it exiles itself at the end of combat. And at 15 to 20, we create one of those tokens and roll again. We'll always be targeting Mishra with this if we have him on the field, because we can order our triggers so that the Mishra's attack triggers will go off after everything else. Crankdrill Mob Boss, because we got quite a few goblins in the deck. We can tap him to create X/1/1 red goblins, where X is the number of goblins we control. It's a good card. Built a deck around him once. Karlach, Fury of Avernus. Whenever you attack, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap all attacking creatures. They gain first strike until end of turn. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So yeah, more extra combats, because who doesn't like extra combats? Urabrask the Hidden gives all our stuff haste, and creatures our opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. That's a good way to shut down the blocks and get in for some damage. Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker allows us to copy target non-legendary creature we control once, and the token will gain haste, and then we sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. 5 mana. It's a good card. Originally had Zealous Conscripts in the deck, which would untap Kiki-Jiki and go infinite with Purphoros, but meh, too easy. Holga Relentless Rager, red, and 4. Haste, Holga Relentless Rager must be blocked if able. Whenever Holga attacks, each creature you control attacking a player gets +1/+0 for each creature that player controls. Okay. That's a good effect. I like that. Stardrake, otherwise known as Scourge of the Throne. Flying, dethrone. Whenever Stardrake attacks for the first time each turn, if it's attacking the player with the most life or tied for most life, untap all attacking creatures. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. 6 mana, 5/5 dragon. Not that bad. Itali Primal Storm, because we care about attack triggers and just attacking in general. Whenever Itali Primal Storm attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs, including our own library. So we can basically use Demonic Vampiric Tutor, get a card we want to the top of our deck. Itali's trigger will then happen. We flip the card, cast it for free, and then we get something like Shield of the Apocalypse or Phyrexian Triniform. Embercleave, one of the only equipments in the deck. A red and 4, flash speed. This spell costs 1 less for each attacking creature you control. When Embercleave enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. The equipped creature gets +1/+1, has double strike and trample. Equip cost of 3. It's pretty good in the deck, I'd say. Not the best card, but there's certainly worse options we could have put in. Impact Tremors is a enchantment for 1 and a red that allows us to, well, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. It's like a mini Purphoros in a way. Aggravated Assault is an enchantment that says red, and 3. Untap all creatures you control. After this main phase, there is an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. Activate only as a sorcery. Get it down in the early game, hope no one destroys it, activate its ability a bunch in the late game. Stomp our enemies. There's the goal. Wheel of Misfortune, even I don't know what this one does, but I'm not even going to bother reading it. What the hell, I'll try. Each player secretly chooses a number greater than 0. Or 0. 0 or greater, there we go. Then all players reveal those numbers simultaneously and determine the highest and lowest numbers revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number. Each player who didn't choose the lowest number discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. See? Complicated. I don't like reading it. Then we have Blasphemous Act, deals 13 damage to each creature on the battlefield and costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield. With a cost of 9, it goes down pretty easy with this deck. Then we have Chaos Warp, the only red instant. Red and 2, the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. So, yeah, that's Mishra claimed by Gex. If you like this content, please let me know down in the comments below, and thank you, and please like and subscribe.